Good evening and welcome to another edition of Dodgers Dogs as part of the Dodgers Daily Network. My name is Austin Brubaker. It is my privilege to be able to continue to talk through the offseason of the Los Angeles Dodgers, your back-to-back World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. I had a show that I had the privilege to be able to do. It actually was a part one in this series that we're talking to. It's two-part introduction into the offseason for the Dodgers that we're going to be going through in depth. So if you have not had the chance to be able to watch part one, I highly recommend you doing so because it provides a lot of information. It's very rich with information, but also a lot of context to a lot of the things that I'm going to be discussing tonight. But I encourage you, if you did not get a chance to be able to watch that, continue to interact as best as we possibly can. There might be some things that I discussed in the previous one to where if I don't address all of the different aspects of the offseason, please go back and watch that other one. I also want to thank you guys for the patience. Had some things pop up this evening. Was originally supposed to start this at 6 o'clock Pacific. Got delayed a little bit by a little bit over half an hour, but we are live today. And this is going to be a show that I believe is going to be worth it because during the last show, we really discussed the Dodgers roster in general. What does the entering into the offseason, what does the roster actually look like? Today, we're going to be taking a little bit of a different turn. It's going to start with another evaluation of the Dodgers roster, but in particular to get to some of the needs that the Dodgers have, and particularly we're going to be looking at outfielders and relief pitchers that are or could be available on the market today. And we're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive into that. I'm going to lead you through each one of the parts and what this is designed to do. I'm going through a lot of different information, a lot of spiel, because I want to make sure that all of this is addressed and all of this is emphasized as we go on. All of this is designed to create discussion about the Los Angeles Dodgers. One of the things that was so important and so emphasized in the parade yesterday was the Dodgers want to go and win another World Series championship. This was a theme consistently emphasized by each one of the players. They are not satisfied with back-to-back World Series championships. As Dave Roberts said, they want to go for the three-peat. And so how do you get them to the three-peat? I think there's a couple of areas that the Dodgers desperately need to address. We'll be talking about two areas in particular just to get you guys introduced and start to analyze some of these players in the offseason. My analysis is not going to be complete. I want you guys to continue to dive into information, but I also want to present you guys with as much information at the start as possible so you can start with analyzing these players as best as you possibly can. That's the goal of this video. It is a privilege to be able to interact with you. Similar to the last video, probably won't get to as many comments during the live chat, but if you look back at the comment section that we had discussed in the part one of the video, I tried to address as many people as I possibly could with all the questions that they have or different thoughts. So if you have thoughts in this video and you want me to address them particularly, leave them in the chats to discuss with each other. But if you want to directly talk to me, leave it in an actual comment of the video and I will get back to that as soon as I possibly can. But a lot of cool and familiar faces here with us. V-Track, Bruce Davis, Tark the Shark, C-Nav, Christopher Navarro is in the chat. Craig Osterberg is with us, Yan Yi, O'Donnell Boy. A lot of people are in the chat right now. Highly encourage you guys to be able to interact with each other and really talk through each one of these aspects of the offseason just to get us started in the mindset of, as an organization, how do you construct the 2026 Dodgers to be back-to-back World Series champions? That's what we're going to do. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to, and I totally forgot to do this. I totally forgot to actually share the Excel spreadsheet that we have. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share that live in the chat. So what I have done is I have created my own Excel spreadsheet designed to be something that you guys can utilize to get as much information in a centralized place as possible. A lot of this information is public, but it's difficult to be able to find in multiple different places. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this down here. Try to be patient with what I have in some of the spreadsheets. Some of the stuff that you might see might be later on in the video. What I have done is I've just uploaded that. It is an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to go ahead and pin that to the top. That is the spreadsheet that I'm going to be utilizing, and so you guys can go ahead and see and make your own decisions from there what is going to be happening with the team and with the organization. But what we're going to do is we're going to cut over, and what we're going to address first is the position player side, and we're going to spend a lot of time on the position player side. First off, we're going to do a little bit of a quick evaluation, a little bit of a rewind as to the players that are on the roster or players that they potentially could bring back. What are some of their quick strengths? We'll roll through this incredibly quickly before we get to potential outfield targets. That's going to be the thing that we're going to be talking about just briefly, just to introduce you guys to each one of the targets and what some of their strengths and how they could help coincide with the Dodgers rosters. What we're going to do is we're going to cut over to this. This is in the roster construction tab that we have. If you actually scroll over, we have pitchers that are currently on the roster. The Dodgers roster, if you include Max Muncy, includes 41 players. This includes players that had been on the 60-day injured list. They have to be added back to the 40-man roster. So guys like a Gavin Stone is back on the roster. Guys like a River Ryan or a Brusdar Graterol and a Brock Stewart and Evan Phillips, Tony Gonsolin, all of those guys have to be back on the roster. If you add up all of the pitchers, that does not include any of the free agents, and the position players, again, does not include the free agents. You'll notice no Kike Hernandez, no Miguel Rojas. That adds up to a total of 41 different players. So these are currently the position players that the Dodgers have as an organization. We'll just roll through these pretty quickly. Shohei Ohtani, Will Smith, Mookie Betts, Tommy Edman, Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, Teoscar Hernandez, Andy Pages. They also have Ben Rortvedt currently on the roster. He does not have any minor league options, which means if he is part of the organization, he has to be on the major league club. Different discussion, not for today though. Optional guys that they have on their 40-man roster include Dalton Rushing, Alex Freeland, Hae-Sung Kim, Alex Call, Justin Dean, and Esteury Ruiz. What we're going to do right now is we're actually going to break down each one of these offensive players and look at some of the strengths that each one of these players have and particularly define their role going into the offseason so that we understand just where this offense is as a total. So, Shohei Ohtani, obviously one of the best hitters in the game of baseball. Do not need to spend much time. Designated hitter, likely the one hitter for the Dodgers. You can have him 1, 2, 3. Doesn't matter. He's one of the best hitters in the game of baseball. Mookie Betts made tremendous strides at the shortstop position this past year. If you look at his numbers, which again, each one of these numbers, and I should have repeated this at the start, what we're going to be utilizing to analyze each one of these players is not just their 2025 stats. I don't believe that is completely representative as to how good a player is. We're going to be utilizing 2023 through 2025 stats, and we're going to be looking to see just how good they are over the course of the past 3 seasons. I think that's going to give us the best representation as to the player that they actually are. So, for example, with Mookie Betts, who was not a good hitter this past year, or closer to league average as a hitter, I think he's much better than that, and I think as he gets a little bit more healthy, hopefully he does not start the season sick, I think he's going to be a little bit closer, if not exact, to the player that he was before, but a little bit closer to the type of player that he actually is. Mookie Betts, if you look at his numbers 2023 through 2025, 136 WRC plus, really solid hitter for there. Freddie Freeman, obviously first baseman, speaks for himself. Max Muncy, $10 million club option. The Dodgers haven't officially picked that up. I anticipate them doing that within the next day or two. Remember, Max Muncy's club option has to be picked up by Thursday, I think by 5 p.m. Eastern time. Don't exactly quote me on that. And then Will Smith as well. What I want to do, though, is focus a little bit more, particularly on some of the outfielders that the Dodgers have. Let's look at some of the outfield stats that the Dodgers have, particularly when it comes to players like a Teoscar Hernandez. Now, where is Teoscar Hernandez's strength as an individual player? If you look at his past 3 seasons, this year, a little bit of a down year for him, but overall about 114 WRC plus, is able to hit for a little bit of power. We have the overall results. We have some of the expected stats, meaning his expected batting average, slugging, and expected weighted on base average as provided by StatCast. These are some of the numbers, a little bit above league average for him. Where Teoscar Hernandez particularly succeeds as a player, and this is a common theme for the outfielders, is he is much better against left-handed pitching than he is right-handed pitching. Teoscar can, over the past 3 seasons, handle both, but he's much better against lefties than he's righties. 129 WRC plus against left-handed pitching versus a 110 WRC plus versus right-handed pitching over the past 3 seasons. Teoscar obviously has some power numbers that he's puts up, 204 ISO. Not really good discipline numbers though, meaning you have a guy that doesn't draw a whole lot of walks and strikes out quite a bit, and is also not a great defender. Just a little bit of review of what we had talked about during the show yesterday, and I went into a little bit of detail about this. The defensive stats are a little bit imperfect, to say the least. The 3 main defensive stats that teams are going to be utilizing, or at least the public utilizes to analyze the defensive players: defensive run save, outs above average, fielding run value, each measuring something a little bit different. What they are cumulative statistics, meaning you earn them the more that you actually play. And I don't think that is a fair representation to just how good a player actually is, meaning that if a player doesn't play a whole lot, whether he's a great defender or whether he's a bad defender, you're not going to get a full understanding of just how good that player is. So what I have done is I've actually averaged out each one of these and then put that on a scale of 162 games for 1 season. What would, on average, this player be worth? Teoscar Hernandez does not grade well out as a defender, which I think is very apparent. So we have Teoscar Hernandez, a little bit more of a free-swinging, power right-handed bat as an outfielder. Similarly, Andy Pages is under contract for the Dodgers, which I'll go into a little bit of a different rant. I addressed this rant a little bit during the show yesterday, but we might address it a little bit later. Andy Pages, 262 average in his Dodgers career so far, 107 WRC plus. Expected numbers, relatively solid, around league average for him. Andy Pages really excels in addition against left-handed pitching, 133 WRC plus for him, a little bit of power, not a huge walk percentage, even lower than Teoscar's at about 5%. Strikeout percentage is just under 23%, just above or just below league average. And then Andy Pages is a pretty good defender in the outfield. One of the things that was a revelation through the course of the season was Andy Pages was a really poor outfielder at the beginning of the season. And then you fast forward throughout the season and he started making catch after catch, especially the home run robberies during the middle portion of the season, and really turned himself into a really solid outfielder, culminating in Game 7 of the World Series. Obviously, the catch running over Kike Hernandez. Andy Pages, really solid outfielder that the Dodgers have, can hit against left-handed pitching. Now, the other outfielder that is part of the Dodgers roster that is most likely to be on the Dodgers roster is a guy by the name of Alex Call. Alex Call obviously came over in the trade with the Washington Nationals in exchange for a couple of minor league arms, Jean-Paul Lignon and Eric Swang, 2 talented guys. The Dodgers decided to add Alex Call. Now, Alex Call, I think, gets a little bit underappreciated for what he is actually capable of doing. If you look at his past 3 seasons, one of the things that you'll notice about him is he's not a power guy. He very much is an on-base type of machine / disciplined hitter. 100 WRC plus, meaning he's just a league average type of hitter. The expected numbers aren't necessarily great, but he does a really solid job in a role, especially against left-handed pitching. Again, a common theme that we're seeing with the Dodgers outfielders is they have 3 different guys that are significantly better against left-handed pitching than they are against right-handed pitching. Not a whole lot of power for Alex Call. Where he does exceed, draws a lot of walks, not a whole lot of strikeouts, just a 17.5% strikeout percentage. The chase percentage is particularly low for Alex Call, and the whiff percentage is also low. He's also a really solid defender. So that leaves you as a Dodgers lineup, again, this is a lot of review for you guys before we get into the outfielders that are available, because I want to reestablish who these players are and what the potential target might be for the Dodgers. You have a couple of different outfielders as part of this mix. Teoscar Hernandez and Andy Pages, both in the lineup, likely against right-handed pitching. Both guys that are everyday type of players. We saw them play just about every single day through the course of the regular season. Going into next year, I'm not anticipating those guys to be platoon options, meaning I'm expecting those guys to get 150 games-ish each this upcoming season. Andy Pages, Teoscar Hernandez, full-time players if they are part of the Dodgers organization, which that is my expectation. However, they are better against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching. And then Alex Call can be a guy that you can utilize against both righties and lefties. 92 versus 114 WRC plus against righties and lefties respectively over the past 3 seasons. However, I think he fits, and I think the organization likes him better in more of a platoon type role, meaning only fitting in really against lefties. We saw this in the course of the playoffs when he went almost exclusively just against the Philadelphia Phillies and their left-handed pitching. And as they started to face other teams like the Brewers or like the Toronto Blue Jays, much more right-handed heavy staffs, you didn't get to see a whole lot of Alex Call. I think that would be more of the role for him. So as we cut back over here, before we go into some of the outfield potential targets, what the Dodgers have to decide as an organization and as a staff. First off, with their outfielders, before we get into the minor league depth, which we talked about a little bit during the show yesterday, because there is a lot of depth at the minor league level with their outfielders, they have to establish what their priority is in the outfield. And the reason why I'm emphasizing they have 3 outfielders that are better against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching is because I think that is an issue that the Dodgers as an organization has to address, meaning that any potential target that they go out and get to add to this outfield, I think first that has to be the goal in mind for the Dodgers, because they don't have a lot of guys in the outfield that can do super well against left-handed pitching. And one of the other guys, like a Tommy Edman, who can fill in the role in the outfield, also much better against lefties than he is against righties. So the goal, or at least one of the main goals that the Dodgers should have, is to get somebody who can hit against right-handed pitching. I think that is goal number 1 for the Dodgers. What you can argue and what you can weigh, and this comes with a philosophical discussion as far as who you want to target and who you want to actually go out and get. Do you want to prioritize that specific aspect, meaning going out and targeting a guy who can get right-handed, go ahead and hit against right-handed pitching, or is defense more a priority? Meaning, Andy Pages, there has been a lot of criticism in the past, in particular, about his defense in center field, or rather, the profile of Andy Pages, and this is actually something that I agree with, fits a little bit better in right field as opposed to center field. So, is the goal for the Dodgers as an organization to go out and get a center fielder in particular, somebody who might be a pretty solid defender in center field, so then you can have a center fielder out there, a pure center fielder with Andy Pages in right field, and then you have 2 spots of your outfield defense that are really solid, and then you have Teoscar Hernandez filling in the mix. That could be an avenue that the Dodgers go out and target. It comes down to priority as to what you want to find. Or is there a different aspect, whether you're the Dodgers and you want to go out and target some sort of outfielder? Do you want to prioritize something else? For example, do you want to follow the model that the Toronto Blue Jays pursued, in which you have a more heavy contact oriented team, somebody that doesn't strike out a whole lot? Is that more of your top priority? Do you see a little bit too much boom or bust and want somebody who doesn't strike out quite as much? Is that what your priority is? All of these different priorities, you're going to have to try to figure out which one that you want to address the most. And as you look for players that meet more and more of this criteria, meaning hits against right-handed pitching well, and plays good defense, and has good contact skills, the price starts to go up and up and up. And it's not necessarily the price that I'm concerned about if you're the Los Angeles Dodgers. It is the number of years that take place to sign each one of these players, because the Dodgers already have several players locked up to longer term deals that are going to impact decisions that they can go ahead and make in the future. So with all that in mind, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some of the outfield targets that are going to be available. And what I have done is I have created a little bit of a list of outfield targets that could be available either in free agency or via trade. Now, I need to make a clarification and make this crystal clear for anybody who's watching, especially with the trade targets. Not every single one of these players is going to be available. In fact, there's a good chunk of these players that are not going to be available, and they are strictly there to provide some sort of comparison for some of the players to say, okay, where does this guy fit in? Or it's not my expectation that a lot of these guys are traded, or there could be maybe one scenario, if this happens, then potentially they could become available, in which some of these trade targets could go ahead and be acquired. I want to make this crystal clear. I'm not expecting each one of these guys to be moved. However, there could be a world in which this happens, in which case I want to see how their numbers actually stack up in comparison to some of the other players. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a section of free agents, followed by a section of trade targets that the Dodgers could potentially pursue. And we're going to be going through a lot of the strengths and weaknesses of each one of these guys. So if you have the Excel spreadsheet, you can go towards the end where it says outfield potential targets. And this is the list that I have. It's going to be very similar to what you're going to see for some of the other analysis that I have done, with some additional information in there that kind of helps rank it, not in a pure form, but in a little bit more of a numerical form. We'll get to that in just a minute. So I just want to go through some of the names that are available in the outfield market as free agent outfielders. So we have the big name, the name that everybody's going to be talking about, Kyle Tucker. We'll go through the names first, then we'll break down each one of these players individually. We have Kyle Tucker, Cody Bellinger, the former Dodger, is a free agent outfielder. Mike Yastrzemski, Max Kepler, Trent Grisham, Randall Grichuk, Rob Refsnyder, Harrison Bader, Cedric Mullins, Michael Conforto, Austin Slater, Layden Thomas, Austin Hayes could potentially be available depending on what happens with his mutual option, Miguel Andujar, and Willie Castro. I don't think that's necessarily a complete list. For example, guys like a Starling Marte or a Tommy Pham are technically available, but these are just a wide range of guys that could potentially be interesting if you are an organization or if you're a fan of the Los Angeles Dodgers. And then for potential trade targets, these are the names that I have collected. Again, not each one of these guys is going to be traded. In fact, a large portion of these guys will definitely not be traded, but these are guys that I pulled as a possible scenario could take place where some of these guys could be available. This includes Byron Buxton, Wilyer Abreu, Seiya Suzuki, Taylor Ward, Ian Happ, Jarren Duran, Lars Nootbaar, Stephen Kwan, Brandon Marsh, Brendan Donovan, Garrett Mitchell, Jacob Young, Luis Robert Jr., Dalton Varsho, Adolis Garcia, Mike Tauchman, O'Neill Cruz, and TJ Friedl. All of these guys are talented players, but each of them have their own strengths and weaknesses. So what I have right here is information. One, whether or not they're a free agent. We will add whether or not they receive the qualifying offer as this becomes available. What the qualifying offer, if the Dodgers were to sign somebody who has a qualifying offer attached to them, is the Dodgers would end up forfeiting a draft pick as a result. So one player that's almost certainly going to get the qualifying offer is Kyle Tucker. If the Dodgers were to sign Kyle Tucker, they would lose a draft pick as a result of signing him, and the Chicago Cubs would gain a draft pick for losing out on Kyle Tucker's services. We also have the position of each one of these players, meaning what position do they primarily play. And this is where you're going to find whether or not a player can or has played a whole lot of center field. For example, of the free agent targets, Cody Bellinger can play some center field. Trent Grisham, Harrison Bader, Cedric Mullins, Lane Thomas are some of your guys that are going to be, especially if you want to pursue somebody who can really play center field, those are going to be some of the targets that you're going to be looking at. Has the which way they actually bat, left-handed versus right-handed, the age in which they're going to be next season, as well as the projected years and cost. Now, this comes from a couple of different services. This comes from either Fangraphs with the fans' projected contract, or NBC Sports issued some sort of contract prediction for a large amount of players. I used either one of those, so huge credit to both of them for their services and what they did. Whichever one was the largest contract prediction, this is not going to be necessarily accurate, but it's going to hopefully show you the range in which some of these players could get contracts. For example, Kyle Tucker, likely going to get a large, massive deal, a 9-year, $360 million deal, or something even close to that range is what it's going to cost to get you a Kyle Tucker, versus somebody like a Max Kepler, who might get a 1-year, $7 million-ish type of deal. These are the names that we're going to be looking at. Again, down here are some of the players. This is the team control and cost that it took as far as the number of years of control each one of these players have. If a player has more years of control, they're going to be more expensive than players with a shorter amount of years. For example, some of the reasons why I have Seiya Suzuki and Ian Happ on this roster is because if the Cubs decided to re-sign Kyle Tucker, not anticipating that, but if they decided to do so, Seiya Suzuki and Ian Happ only have 1 year left on their deal. Perhaps that could be something where they could potentially look on moving off of them to save some money for the money that's going to cost to go ahead and get a Kyle Tucker. These are the names that we're going to consider. What I would encourage you guys to do is, if there are additional names that I had missed, please leave them down in the comment section or in the chat, and I will do my best to be able to add some of those names as we get going, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to compare each one of these players. Now, before I reveal some of that, if we look at some of the Dodgers offensive stats, I had looked at a couple of different measures. We had looked at individual results, what happened on the actual field, average, on base percentage, slugging, WRC+, so on and so forth. The expected stats, splits for righties versus lefties, power component, discipline, defense, and sprint speed. All aspects that are important to evaluating a player. I picked out some of the most crucial stats to be able to help evaluate each one of these players, or some of the most common stats that you can find out there. What I have decided to do is actually weight each one of those stats, and with each one of these metrics, decide to actually rank each one of these players. So just as a cheat sheet before we get going, which a lot of this information is available for each one of you guys, I have different weights for each one of these players over here, depending on how important I see each one of these stats. Again, this is just additional information for you guys to see as far as the spreadsheet. And I have different rankings. We're going to take the rankings very loosely at this point, or at least the overall rankings. And what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate each player individually and how they rank with each other. So what you're going to notice is right now I have pulled up the results section. What you see right here is the rank. This is the rank of how each player compares based off of the results that they had 2023 through 2025 stats. For example, Kyle Tucker, over the past 3 seasons, hit 278, 380 on base percentage, 511 slugging. That's a 379 weighted on base average, or a 146 WRC+. Kyle Tucker has been an elite hitter in the game of baseball, and you look at his overall offensive production of what he's been able to do, and it is not rivaled by many of the players on this list. He, out of all of these players, ranks as the best pure hitter of results-wise over the past 3 seasons. Kyle Tucker has been absolutely tremendous. Let's actually break him down a little bit further because I think it is important to understand who this player actually is and why he's projected to get such a huge deal. It's not just because he's put up results. 146 WRC plus is elite. The expected numbers are insane and back up just how good he actually is. One thing that you can do is you can compare the expected numbers versus the actual numbers, and you're going to notice they're both equivalent with each other. His splits, righty versus lefties, are really equivalent as well. He is equally as good against righties as he is against lefties, meaning he is a really solid full-time bat that you can put out there. Power numbers, he's one of the better power hitters in this crop as well. The only ones that are a little bit better with their power numbers have been Byron Buxton, Willie Abreu, and Seiya Suzuki. 233 ISO for Kyle Tucker. He also is incredibly disciplined. This is especially if you want somebody who's just a really solid pure hitter, somebody that's going to be a little bit more Toronto Blue Jays-esque, except he has the walk ability as well, the patience at the plate. 14% walk percentage, 14.5% strikeout percentage. In the game of baseball, it does not get much better than what Kyle Tucker is able to do as a pure hitter at the plate. Where it gets a little bit tricky is he's not necessarily the greatest defender out there, a little bit above league average by defensive run saves. However, by the other defensive metrics, not necessarily that great, -4 and -2. He also is not incredibly quick, which means there is going to likely be some sort of deceleration with his athleticism as he gets older. So the question with Kyle Tucker is, do you believe in his offensive production enough, especially for whatever length of contract up to a 9-year deal that Kyle Tucker could be getting, to be able to go out and give him that long-term contract? Is a player who has averaged a 145 WRC plus over the past 3 seasons worth going out and making the massive investment? He is somebody that's going to get a lot of target, really good disciplined hitter, hits for a lot of power, checks just about every box offensively that you could possibly imagine. The one thing that you have to concern about, and this is especially apparent with the defense that Shohei Ohtani doesn't provide with him being the designated hitter, and with having a negative defender in the outfield with Teoscar Hernandez, is as a defense, can you have a Teo in left, Pages in center, Kyle Tucker in right field, defensive outfield? I think it'd be fine for right now, but how does this age throughout the entirety of his contract is something that the Dodgers are going to have to consider and evaluate. I'm anticipating the Dodgers to be somewhat aggressive with Kyle Tucker. Whether or not they go all the way will depend on what the market is like and where the Dodgers set some of their limits for going ahead and pursuing a player of this caliber. He is a tremendous hitter, though, and is by far and away the best outfielder in this class. Now let's go to Cody Bellinger, because he's going to be the name that's going to be brought up a lot with the Dodgers, and rightfully so because of his past history in Los Angeles. You look at his numbers the past 3 years, 2023 through 2025 stats, 281 batting average throughout that tenure, 338 on base percentage, 477 slugging, 123 WRC plus for Cody Bellinger during this time period. Been really solid offensively. There is a little bit of concern with some of the expected stats during this time period. You look at his weighted on base average, 346 versus a 321 expected weighted on base average. A little bit of a difference between what the expected results and what he's actually producing, which could mean there could be some negative regression coming for Cody Bellinger. Why am I saying that? Because I want to point out some of the potential flaws with each one of these players before the Dodgers make some sort of move on them. What's interesting about Cody Bellinger is he is actually better against left-handed pitching than he is against right-handed pitching. You look at his numbers over the past 3 seasons, 113 WRC plus versus righties, pretty solid. That's about as good as Alex Call is versus left-handed pitching over the past 3 seasons. but a 151 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. Cody Bellinger, if he is added to the Dodgers, would be an everyday type of player. Now, as far as some of those numbers for his power components, two of the things that I'm a little bit concerned about with Bellinger, his barrel percentage, pretty low at 6.7% over the past 3 seasons. Hard hit percentage, also not necessarily great at 34.3%. He does pull the ball in the air quite a bit, doesn't hit it on the ground, which does lead to some power for him. As far as Cody Bellinger, he is not a player right now that is striking out much at all. It's a sub 15%, similar to a Kyle Tucker, so he's pretty disciplined, or at least is going to put a lot of contact, put a lot of balls in play. Also, pretty solid defender. Defensive run saves, outs above average, and fielding run value all agree that he's pretty solid. So with Cody Bellinger, the type of player that he actually is he has put up some really solid results on the season. However, and this is where some of my concerns, especially with Cody Bellinger, because some of the projections having him getting a 5-year potential deal, is he actually addressing what you are needing on this Dodgers team, meaning somebody that can hit against right-handed pitching particularly well. With Cody Bellinger, you'd be locking him up likely to some sort of long-term deal, and he would be another guy that can hit left-handed pitching really well, and in fact does that better a little bit. He's a reverse splits guy than he is against right-handed pitching. And there are some concerns, particularly with the power department, with his barrel percentage and hard hit percentage, that there could be some negative regression coming at some point in the future. However, he does have the ability to play all positions in the outfield and could be and has been a really solid outfielder out there. Do the negatives outweigh the positives for you? And are you willing to invest again long-term with Cody Bellinger, even though the last time he was on the Dodgers didn't necessarily work out too well for him? That is going to be the questions that you're going to have to address. Now we're going to turn a little bit the page into somebody that I actually think is a sneaky dark horse for the Dodgers to be able to add. Now, when I say dark horse for the Dodgers to be able to add, what I mean by that is he is somebody that uniquely fits with some of the needs that the Dodgers have. Not to say that this player is a perfect player, because he certainly is not, and there's going to be some holes that are brought up if the Dodgers decided to bring this player. But there actually is a fairly good argument to bring this player to the Dodgers to be able to help fit the needs for them. And this is a player that does not have the greatest history with the Los Angeles Dodgers in the past because of the teams that he's played upon, but yet the profile-wise, especially because he is not expected to get any sort of long-term contract. Really, I've looked at all the projections, seemingly a 1-year deal, both time frame-wise and fit-wise, might be a sneaky fit and could be a path that the Dodgers turn down. Not that they will, not that they should, but this could be a unique fit for the Dodgers going into next season, and I'm just warning you about this right now. The fit that I'm talking about is next on this list, Mike Yastrzemski. Now, you might say, why is this guy talking about Mike Yastrzemski? It's the Los Angeles Dodgers. It's the World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. Why on earth would the Dodgers bring Mike Yastrzemski in? Well, let's take a look at some of his profile just to see where he actually is. Results-wise, really kind of near middle of the pack as a player. 107 WRC plus for him over the past 3 seasons. 232, 322, 426. Nothing really stands out for you as a player right there. And neither does a lot of the expected stats, although they fit about right in line with what his actual results are. Really middle of the pack as terms of a hitter. Where he stands out as a player is particularly with his righty versus lefty splits. Now, let's get one thing clear. Mike Yastrzemski is a terrible hitter against left-handed pitching, or at least the numbers reflect it. 57 WRC plus against left-handed pitching is not good. However, as we've already addressed, the Dodgers have 3 outfielders currently that hit at least at a 110 WRC plus level against left-handed pitching, in Teoscar Hernandez, Alex Call, and Andy Pages. What they don't have is somebody that can hit right-handed pitching. And if you look at free agent outfielders, if you don't want to give Kyle Tucker the long-term deal and you want to look at the free agent market for outfielders, the second best option to go ahead and get an outfielder that can hit right-handed pitching is Mike Yastrzemski. And what the Dodgers could do if they were to acquire somebody like this, and this doesn't have to be him particularly, I'm talking about somebody that has an extreme split, righty versus lefty, is you would only play Mike Yastrzemski in advantageous matchups, meaning against right-handed pitching. And where this comes up quite a bit is about 70 to 75% of the plate appearances that major league players have are against right-handed pitching, which means there's going to be a lot of opportunities where you take advantage of this matchup. And if it's a 95% of his plate appearances are against righties, you could see him having a little bit of success. Let's dig into the numbers a little bit deeper. Power numbers. Let's look at Cody Bellinger versus Mike Yastrzemski and the power numbers that they have. If we look at Mike Yastrzemski and Cody Bellinger ISO numbers over the past 3 seasons, 196 for Bellinger, 194 for Yastrzemski. If you look at the barrel and hard hit percentage, it is actually Yastrzemski that is significantly better than Bellinger over the past couple of years. And if you look at the pulled air percentage, it's higher than Bellinger. Ground ball percentage is lower than Cody Bellinger, meaning that Yastrzemski has been a better power hitter than Cody Bellinger. Let's look at walks and strikeouts. Strikeouts advantage goes to Cody Bellinger, about a 15% to a 23.5%. If you look at walks, which seems to be fitting with what the organization likes to do, and chase percentage, Mike Yastrzemski does not walks a whole lot, 11% versus 8%, and a 22% chase percentage. That is really solid and fits right in line with what the organization wants. In addition, defensively, if you look at the outs above average, just on Baseball Savant, you'll say, oh, he's not a good defender. If you look at defensive run saves over the past 3 seasons, 18 defensive runs saved, 0 outs above average, 3 field and run value. That creates a score of about 3 if you use the metric that I have, which is right about in line with the Cody Bellinger. Now, why have I spent a whole lot of time with him in particular? One, I want to address that there are different ways to be able to go ahead and target each one of these players. And I wanted to provide a direct comparison, especially for somebody who's going to require a 5-year deal worth about $130 to $140 million versus somebody likely to require just a 1-year type of deal. What could you be getting if you did not want to get the long-term contracts? And this is especially apparent. We talked about this on the show yesterday. The Dodgers have a lot of outfielders coming through the system right now that are going to be on the doorsteps within the next couple of years. Guys we talked about on the show yesterday, like Chris Newell, Damon Keith, going to be some of the closest ones, but some of the impact guys that I know you guys are excited about. And guys like Zach Earhart, who they traded for, James Tibbs III, Zaire Hope, Josue De Paula, Kendall George, a Mike Sirota, Cole Myers, Eduardo Quintero, all of these different guys, and not including some of the guys that they drafted that are coming up through the system, are going to be coming up shortly, which means that the Dodgers have to make a determination. Do they want to use those guys as trade bait? Or do the Dodgers want to make sure that there is avenues open for them to be able to come into the roster? If they wanted to decide that they wanted to create avenues for them to be able to implement themselves into the roster, while also getting somebody that profiles similar-ish to Bellinger in some components, but fits directly with some of the needs that the Dodgers have, Mike Yastrzemski is a sneaky addition that the Dodgers could potentially pursue. Not that he's the perfect target, but he is somebody that the Dodgers could potentially pursue, and that is why he is one of my underrated targets for the Dodgers to go out and get. Some of the other guys, we'll cut back over, if we can go ahead and find this, cut back over to here. Some of the other guys that are available, Max Kepler, who was with the Philadelphia Phillies. We talked about him a little bit briefly during the last offseason. Round league average numbers on the season for him, 102 WRC+. You look at the expected stats, they are really solid for Max Kepler, 258 expected batting average. He ranks about 9th, and so if you go and rank just the free agents, he's 3rd on the list as far as outfielders. He's about league average against both, and so there's not an extreme strength that he's able to provide, just above league average against righties. Power, pretty solid for Max Kepler, is about league average in a lot of different components. So if you just want a league average type of guy, he can help fill in the role. One player that had a really solid 2025 season, but if you look at the numbers of 2023 and 2024, he is somebody that is not quite as good of a hitter, is Trent Grisham. This is actually a little bit surprising because I was expecting the numbers based on what he did last year to be a little bit better. Over the past couple of seasons, 107 WRC+ for him. He does not hit the ball or get a lot of batted ball luck, just a 252 batting average on balls in play. The expected numbers were really solid for him this past year, and yet even with that, they're still not necessarily great, although there could be some sign that he could be getting a little bit better. He is somebody, though, hits for a little bit of power, does play some center field if you are Trent Grisham, draws a lot of walks, does not chase a lot. There is, however, some swing and miss in his game. About a league average-ish defender. Defensive run save doesn't like him, but outs above average in field and run value likes Trent Grisham if you are him. He is somebody that you can take a look at, especially if you want to target a left-handed hitting center fielder. He could be a potential option that you go ahead and pursue. Some of the other guys I'm not as interested in are guys like Randall Grichuk or Rob Refsnyder. Refsnyder would be somebody if you're looking for a platoon right-handed bat that can hit against left-handed pitching, but as we've already established, the Dodgers have plenty of those guys. Harrison Bader is going to be one guy that gets brought up quite a bit as far as free agent outfielders the Dodgers could pursue. He had a really solid 2025. If you look at the past couple of seasons, 95 WRC+ for him, 251, 306 on base percentage, 395 slugging. The expected numbers aren't really great. A 297 expected WOBA for Harrison Bader. A little bit below league average for both righties and lefties. Not a ton of power or plate discipline. 6% walk percentage, 22.6% strikeout percentage. What he is, if you're looking for the best defender on the free agent market, that's Harrison Bader. Over the past 3 seasons, 16 defensive runs saved, 22 outs above average, 22 field and run value. That gets you about an average up for a 162 game season of about 8 for the defensive value. He would be really solid defender and could fit directly into center field if you want to just go and establish and get somebody who's really solid defensively on the free agent market. I believe he just declined his player option or mutual option with the Phillies. He will be a free agent starting on the 6th. Some of the other names that are on here, Cedric Mullins. I'm not as high on Cedric Mullins. You look at some of his numbers, around league average as a hitter over the past 3 seasons. 228 batting average, 303 on base percentage, 404 slugging. The expected numbers are among the worst of all these options. 291 expected weighted on base average. And you look at his numbers against right-handed pitching, just a 102 WRC+ for him. Can hit for a little bit of power, but not necessarily that great. And as a defender, defensive run saves aren't great for him. -13 over the course of the past couple of seasons. So I'm not super high on Cedric Mullins. Not likely to get a long-term deal, but still a lot of the numbers don't really inspire confidence in somebody that can really help fill in the hole, which again is particularly somebody who can be a solid defender and go ahead and hit against right-handed pitching. Cedric Mullins would be about league average in that category, not the greatest upgrade. What we're going to do is we're going to skip some of these options, not expecting Michael Conforto to come back. Austin Slater, Lade Thomas, Austin Hayes, Miguel Andujar. One of the reasons why I decided to do this is if you look at a player like Miguel Andujar, 296 batting average, you would anticipate him being towards the top of this list. You look at a lot of the expected statistics and how he fits in, much better against lefties. Doesn't really fit in with a lot of the other variables. Not really a great defender to fit in with the mix. So I wanted to provide you guys with that, but also an intriguing option if you wanted just somebody who can hit a whole lot, if that is what your goal is. Let's turn to some of the trade targets, and let's particularly look at some of the left-handed hitting options, because I think in particular, that is going to be the avenue that the Dodgers are going to address more directly, is left-handed hitting bats. We're going to go ahead and skip over Wilyer Abreu for just a minute. He has, I believe, 4 years of team control with the Boston Red Sox. Where a lot of the rumors with the Red Sox are right now is they seem to be wanting to go ahead and trade from some of their outfield depth. And Wilyer Abreu is one of the best defensive right fielders in the game of baseball. 4 years of control on him. If they were to move off of an outfielder, I'm not anticipating him to be an option. He has a very similar profile to a Mike Yastrzemski. You look at his splits, righties versus lefties, 125 WRC plus against right-handed pitching, 62 WRC plus against lefties. He is an exclusive platoon bat. He can hit for a decent amount of power though, 209 ISO for him, 47% hard hit percentage, pulls the ball in the air pretty well as well. He does strike out quite a bit though, 26% strikeout percentage for a Wilyer Abreu, but you look at his defensive numbers over the past couple seasons, 33 defensive runs saved, 14 outs above average, 18 fielding run value. If you average that and scale it on the course of 162 games, that would be like a 13 outs above average type of player. Incredible defensive player if you wanted to add him, but I'm not anticipating him being available at the market. So let's look at some of the other names that I'm sure are getting a lot of discussion in the comments section. Jarren Duran. Jarren Duran, if you look at the overall results, really solid over the past couple of seasons. 276 average, 339 on base percentage, 471 slugging percentage, 121 WRC plus. Has gotten a lot of good batted ball luck for him. If we compare his expected numbers with his actual numbers, it seems like he's gotten a little bit lucky. Expected weighted on base average is 16 points lower than what his actual results are. But again, with Jarren Duran, pretty extreme splits. Righty versus lefty, 138 WRC plus versus right-handed pitching, 78 versus left-handed pitching. Very much somebody that is going to hit against right-handed pitching, which could fit directly into what the Dodgers are looking for. With Jarren Duran, he's got 3 years remaining of club control. Decent power numbers. Barrel percentage isn't necessarily the greatest. And also doesn't pull the ball in the air a lot, which is going to limit what some of his power production actually is. He's probably going to rely a little bit more on some of those base hits with his high batting average, just with the offensive profile that he has. Walk percentage, strikeout percentage, 7.7 and 23.4% respectively. Round league average with each one of those characteristics. Defensively, really solid defender, really above league average defender for him. Let's go into a couple of the other players as well. Lars Nootbaar is a really solid option, especially if you're looking for a stopgap outfielder that could be available by the trade market. Lars Nootbaar absolutely fits in with that mix. Very much more of a on-base percentage type of machine, really good discipline type of numbers. 108 WRC plus over the past 3 seasons. Expected results are actually really solid, and there's a lot of room to grow for Lars Nootbaar. The expected weighted on base average, 18 points higher than what his actual results are. Gets right-handed pitching, 116 WRC plus versus righties versus 88 versus lefties. There is less of the downside versus lefties versus somebody like a Mike Yastrzemski. For example, if you have to play Lars Nootbaar versus lefties, he can hold his own, as in comparison to some of the other guys that we have listed, a little bit better, just have it be slightly below league average. Power isn't necessarily great. It's around to slightly below league average for Lars Nootbaar, 150 ISO. Hits the ball relatively hard. Where he really exceeds, 12.5% walk percentage, about a 20% strikeout percentage, does not chase as well, and does not whiff. As a defender, he's about league average as a defender. So if you want somebody who fits within the Dodgers mold, that's going to be a little bit more of a gritty type of player that can put the ball in play, doesn't strike out a whole lot, and can go ahead and take his walks, Lars Nootbaar is your guy. If you're looking for more of the batting average and can hit really well against righties and play pretty solid defense, Jarren Duran might be your guy that you trade for. Or if you're looking for more of the extreme case of somebody that puts the ball in play, Steven Kwan might be your guy. Jarren Duran obviously has more power than Steven Kwan, but Steven Kwan, 276 batting average, exact same as Jarren Duran during this time period, 344 on base percentage. Where there's a big difference is Jarren Duran, significantly more power than Steven Kwan. Steven Kwan is somebody who there was a lot of rumors about during the course of the trade deadline as far as the Dodgers potentially targeting at that moment. 281 expected batting average. He very much is going to be a batting average type of player. 114 WRC plus versus righties, 94 versus lefties. Where he does not exceed and where he's about the worst as far as all these different options, he does not hit for power. Barrel percentage is a sub 2%. But what he does do, his walk percentage is about 9%. His strikeout percentage is 9.5%. And if you look at, does not whiff at all, you look at his defensive metrics over the past 3 seasons, 48 defensive runs saved, 15 outs above average, 25 field and run value. He is an incredible defender in left field, which means if you want a contact type of player, but limited with some of his power, but incredible defender, Steven Kwan is the extreme case of that. Jarren Duran has a lot of those characteristics, except he can hit for a little bit of additional power, has an additional year of team control. Lars Nootbaar, more of that on-base percentage type of player, just overall solid numbers for him all around. Some of the other players that are likely to be available is a guy like a Brendan Donovan. I'm not going to include Brandon Marsh. I'm not anticipating him being available, but I just have him on the list just in case something were to go down and the Phillies made a bunch of moves in the outfield. Brendan Donovan, however, of the St. Louis Cardinals, a little bit more of a utility guy, a second baseman / a corner outfielder type of player. Could be somebody that the Cardinals, as they're transitioning from different ownership, could decide to move. 282 average over the past 3 seasons, 351 on base percentage, 420 slugging. He had 117 WRC plus in this time period. He would be somebody that would fit into the mix of the Los Angeles Dodgers because of his defensive versatility that he has. Now, he's not going to be the greatest defender as we see, but batting average, bat to ball type of skills, he's got a lot of that. Expected results, really solid for him. 284 expected batting average, 347 expected weighted on base average. That's actually higher than what his results are, meaning the results that are output could actually improve based on quality of contact. Does not hit, or actually let's start right here with the splits, does really well against right-handed pitching, 131 WRC plus against righties, 81 versus left-handed pitching. Does not really hit for a whole lot of power though. Look at the numbers that he has here, just 138 ISO. Doesn't hit the ball incredibly, doesn't pull the ball in the air, doesn't barrel the ball a whole lot, but he doesn't strike out a whole lot. 8% walk percentage, 13% strikeout percentage for him. Doesn't chase, doesn't whiff a whole lot. And then looking at some of the defensive numbers that he has, below average, defensive run saved, above average, slightly outs above average, field and run value, slightly below league average. He's not going to be a great defender. He's not going to be a great runner. 29th out of these players in sprint speed at 26.6 in the 2025 season. But he could be somebody, move around different positions. You could utilize him in the corner outfield or at second base. And this is if you wanted to move somebody like a Tommy Edman to the outfield. He could be an option that you could go ahead and pursue, or potentially, and this is an unlikely but possible scenario, if you wanted to look at adding both a Lars Nootbaar and Brendan Donovan to be able to add to the mix, they could be potential options. Just some other names to be able to throw out there. Garrett Mitchell, I'm not anticipating the Brewers trading him. He's had very limited action as far as his career, but has been pretty solid against right-handed pitching. Really solid defensive outfielder so far in his very young career. He would be more of the project type of case, but if you look at some of his numbers, especially if you want an athlete that's a good defender, that has some of those solid metrics against righties and could have room to grow, especially I've heard a lot of you guys wanting to say this Dodgers offense has to get younger. This could potentially be a guy who already has started his major league career, has missed a lot of time with injuries, but could be, because of some of the success of some of the other players of the Brewers, be targeted in some potential trade. Some of the other really solid defenders, if you wanted the best defensive outfielders as part of the bunch, Jacob Young from the Washington Nationals, really great defender, not much of a hitter. Or Dalton Varsho, really solid defender. Obviously, with what we saw with the Toronto Blue Jays, not anticipating the Blue Jays trading him, especially to the Dodgers at this point. Luis Robert ranks down a little bit lower on this list because of the discipline numbers, does not grade out really well with his discipline. Some of the power numbers are really solid for him, but just the overall results, especially compared to a lot of these players, this is Luis Robert right here, 102 WRC+. You've talked through several different players that are a lot better than Luis Robert is, and Luis Robert, if you compare his splits, below league average against right-handed pitching. So, we cut back over to me. I've thrown a lot of information at you guys about a lot of these players, and I didn't even address each one of the players that's on the list. And what this is going to require for each one of you guys, and we'll get back to one additional thing that's on here in just a minute. What this is going to require for you guys is it's not just me that has to do the homework and talk through each one of these aspects. It's up to you guys to be able to do your own homework and to be able to evaluate each one of these players and where they fit with some of the strengths of the Dodgers. We talked a lot about a lot of different players that could potentially fit within the Dodgers. Do you want them to go for the giant hitter? And that being Kyle Tucker, obviously with what he's able to do in his offensive excellence in each aspect of the game. Is the long-term contract, do you believe in the bat enough to where the long-term contract is going to make up for some of the potential lack in defense later in his career, especially knowing that Dodgers are going to have a lot of players that are going to be aging at the exact same time? With a player like a Cody Bellinger, do you believe enough in his defense, and do you think that the results are going to continue to play out and not necessarily worry about some of the a little bit concerning underlying metrics, and the fact that he's a better hitter against lefties than righties? Do you look at that and say, because he can play center field and because he's got pretty good bat-to-ball type of skills, I want to get Cody Bellinger back in Los Angeles? Do you want to pursue somebody that can go ahead and fit some of the characteristics, maybe not perfectly, or how much more of an upgrade are some of the trade targets that I have mentioned? Guys like a Steven Kwan, guys like a Jarren Duran, guys like a Lars Nootbaar, guys like a Brendan Donovan. How much more or how much better are they than somebody that you could potentially get on a shorter term deal like a Mike Yastrzemski as far as fit onto the roster? And the goal is to try to find the best fit onto the roster as possible, because if we're looking at the Dodgers offense, and again, we're going to go ahead and go to the lineup splits, what you would have to do with this roster is you have to fit them into this mix. Now, this is under the assumption that the Dodgers re-sign Kike Hernandez and Miguel Rojas. That is not a given, but if they decided to do that, you have to find players that fit into this mix and figure out how they would go into each one of these categories. If you were to go ahead and trade for somebody like a Kyle Tucker and a Cody Bellinger, they would fit right into this mix. If it's Kyle Tucker, you move him up in the lineup against righties, and he would take the spot of an Alex Call, in which case Alex Call, you get to sit on the bench, and maybe a couple games a year you get to replace an Andy Pages or a Teoscar Hernandez or a Kyle Tucker, or hope that one of them gets injured. That would be the role that Alex Call would play, in which case is he best served on this roster, or do they need somebody like him, or do they need more versatile type of players like a Kike Hernandez who in an emergency could help fill into that role? With Cody Bellinger, he also likely is somebody that's going to hit every single day versus righties versus lefties. Versus, if you look for a little bit more of the platoon type of options, you could have them just go up against right-handed pitching and have different options that are pretty solid against lefties. Again, without adding any free agent outfielders, with just adding Miguel Rojas into this mix, you could conceivably come up with a lineup against left-handed pitching, in which case all of the hitters over the past 3 seasons have averaged at least a 110 WRC plus against left-handed pitching or better. And that includes Miguel Rojas, Alex Call, Tommy Edman, Andy Pages, all of these different guys. You can construct a lineup that like this. So what is the necessity and need to be able to go out and target individual players? How much more are they going to raise the floor is the difficult question that the organization is going to be able to have to ask. And in addition, how do they fit with the time frame that the Dodgers have with some of their younger outfielders that, in order to make this team long-term sustainably successful, how can they fit into the roster? How can they fit into the organization and make sure that they continue to add young talent as part of the mix? Because again, I will continue to repeat, my biggest fear for this organization and where this dynasty could start to crumble is if they age out of existence, meaning their players that they are relying upon or the players that they give out contracts to are aging veteran players, in which case they are locked up to long-term big money type of deals. And as much money as the Dodgers make, and they make a ton of money right now, that could hamper some of their abilities that they make. And this is also a call for caution and wiseness going into free agency. Let's date back the clock to about this time a year ago. Teoscar Hernandez was a free agent, and this was somebody that Dodgers fans desperately wanted to pursue and desperately wanted to go after. And there were a lot of calls, both by me and by a lot of other people. I don't think I particularly went to this extreme, but there was a lot of calls by Dodgers fans in general. I'll just go ahead and say that, to give Teoscar Hernandez whatever contract that he desired. And this include going up to 4 to 5, maybe even 6 years on a deal. Now let's reevaluate 1 year later. Teoscar Hernandez signed a 3-year, $66 million deal, and there are a lot of calls to get rid of Teoscar Hernandez because he's not a good defender and because he did not contribute offensively to the degree in which he was capable of. What this is designed to say is there has to be intent, there has to be thoroughness, and there has to be a ton of thought into each of these aspects of the game, and you can't just go out and throw money at each one of these players. Otherwise, you might regret some of your decisions. So you have to have rationale and reasons as to how this player is going to fit into the mix, and what role is he particularly going to have to make this offense as good as it possibly can be and make the team as good as possibly can be. Otherwise, you can make reckless decisions. And let's say that the Dodgers went and signed Teoscar Hernandez, let's say to a 4 or 5 year deal. He would be completely untradeable at this point, given the production that he have. And I think it's still very much a question as far as whether he would be tradable at all at this point. Now, I think Teoscar Hernandez is a great player. I think he's going to rebound. I'm not anticipating him to struggle next year as he struggled this year, but the profile player that he is requires him to hit. When he doesn't hit, he does not do well. If you pursue that type of player with the expectation that they're going to hit and you sign them into long-term deals, that is a little bit of, there comes with some inherent risk if you don't have the designated hitter spot open. So it is imperative on the Dodgers to make wise choices to be able to have upsides and benefits to each one of these players. That is the outfield market. The link to the Excel sheet is in the comment section in the chat. I will also put it in the description of the video after this video is concluded so that you have full access to each one of these sheets and can go ahead and explore this for yourself, each one of the numbers. Don't take it from me. Do your own research and be able to make a determination as far as who you think is going to make an impact for the Dodgers. Now, very quickly, we're not going to spend too much time. I'm going to introduce you guys to some of these players and let you do your own research because it's already 10:46 here on the East Coast. Well, first off, I appreciate you guys for tuning in for the show. Really means a whole lot to me. For the Dodgers and the stats that we have, first off, I'll point out one more thing with the outfield target. What you're going to notice for this outfield target is there actually is what is an overall rank. What I want to do with this is not manually done by me. Rather, this is looking at the ranks of the offensive stats that each one of these guys have, putting different weights to each component in order to determine each one of these ranks. I'll show you quickly some of the formulas and stuff that pop up. There's a lot of different formulas and a lot of different math behind the scenes to be able to come up with some of these ranks, and they go ahead into some sort of overall rank. These are not how I would rank each one of these guys. This is not how I would rank the top 10 outfielders that the Dodgers could target. Rather, this is to give you a little bit of visualization as far as the overall average-ish as far as where each of these guys stand within some of the standings based on each one of these individual categories. Again, do not say that Cody Bellinger is the 8th ranked outfield target that I'm saying and go ahead and pursue. Rather, that's just more of a visualization as far as where each of these guys rank or where each of these guys stand based off of the categorical ranks going forward. Just wanted to clarify that once you were exploring the spreadsheet, just to provide a little bit of clarity with that. Let's go quickly into the bullpen. One of the biggest needs, in addition to an outfielder, is a bullpen arm. And when we're talking about bullpen arms, what I am particularly wanting the Dodgers to go ahead and target is a right-handed bullpen arm or somebody that can go ahead and get right-handed hitters out particularly well. Currently, players that are going to be right now in the bullpen for the Dodgers: Anthony Banda, Tanner Scott, Blake Trinan, Alex Vesia. Obviously, Tanner Scott and Blake Trinan really struggled this season, hoping that the results normalize back to what their expected numbers actually are. Anthony Banda, really good against left-handed hitters. Alex Vesia, continued prayers for him, solid against both. But I think if you look at some of the options that the Dodgers have within the system, I think they could really use, especially with some of the bullpen arms that are injured, Bruce Argretero, Evan Phillips, and Brock Stewart, somebody that can help fill in some of the shoes and get right-handed hitters out. So this brings up some of the potential relief targets. Now, this just includes guys that are available via free agency. If I try to go and get trade targets as well, that would take me far too long to be able to come up with all the different trade targets, nor am I anticipating at this point, or it would be a lot more difficult to be able to predict who could be potential targets that the Dodgers could go out and get. So let's go through some of these names really quickly. The guys in blue are right-handed pitchers. The guys in orange are going to be left-handed pitchers. They're going to be down a little bit below. We have Edwin Diaz, the closer from the New York Mets, declined his option. He is a free agent. Devin Williams from the Yankees, spent a lot of time in his career with the Brewers. Raisel Iglesias from the Atlanta Braves. Ryan Helsley was a long time with the Cardinals, free agent. Chris Martin, a little bit of an older player, free agent. Phil Maton, somebody we talked about quite a bit during the trade deadline, and somebody that was traded for pretty cheaply to the Texas Rangers, and is a free agent. Pete Fairbanks has a club option, likely to be exercised, so he's probably going to be removed from this list pretty quickly. Robert Suarez, San Diego Padres closer, free agent. Kirby Yates, obviously, free agent. Paul Sewald, Hunter Harvey, one of the more underrated and underappreciated names on this list. We'll go through his rationale in just a little bit. Tyler Rogers, a little bit funky with his delivery. Emilio Pagan, closer for the Reds. Kenley Jansen, Dodgers legend. Pierce Johnson for the Atlanta Braves. Jonathan Loaizaga. Sir Anthony Dominguez, we saw him with Toronto. Tommy Kahnle, recently with Detroit. Shelby Miller, Jacob Junis, Scott Barlow, Sean Armstrong, Tyler Clinley, Ryan Stanek, Kyle Finnegan, Luke Weaver, Brad Keller, Michael Kopech, Rafael Montero, and Drew Smith are different right-handed relievers that are or could potentially be available. Some of these guys, Pierce Johnson, Jonathan Loaizaga, Scott Barlow, Pete Fairbanks, all have club options. Still waiting to see if they are being exercised or not based on a couple of hours ago, I believe is when we're waiting for that determination. You also have left-handed arms that are available. Danny Coulombe, talked about him during the trade deadline portion, really successful season for him. Jose Alvarado could be available depending on the club option, whether that gets picked up. Gregory Soto, Caleb Thibar, Hobie Milner, Caleb Ferguson, Andrew Chafin, Taylor Rogers, Brent Suter, Wandy Perez, Jalen Beek, Steven Matz, Tim Hill, and Sean Newcomb, all are available. What we have on here, whether or not they are a free agent, whether or not they received the qualifying offer, whether or not, and the latest as far as injury report. So, for example, Chris Martin was most recently undisclosed on the 15-day injured list. Not really sure what exactly that's for. Or for a player like Shelby Miller, going to be out most of 2026 with UCL surgery. We have the position, relief pitcher, what way that they throw, their age, and again, similarly, using Fangraphs or NBC Sports, whichever projection is higher, what the projected years and cost are going to be. Remember, last year, Tanner Scott got a 4-year, $72 million deal with the Dodgers. Relief pitchers are very volatile, and they can be incredibly important, but they can be incredibly risky with going out and getting them to long-term contracts, as the Dodgers fans we most recently saw with Tanner Scott. Didn't necessarily work out the way that Dodgers fans were hoping or anticipating it to work out. So, for example, Edwin Diaz could get a deal as high as a 5-year, $110 million contract. Not saying that this is close or will be the exact estimate, but that's within some of the ballpark as to what some of the projections are for getting a player with Edwin Diaz's services versus somebody like a Raisel Iglesias, a little bit older of a pitcher, but potentially could be just a 2-year, $28 million-ish type of deal for him. These are the players that we're talking about. What we're going to do is I'm just going to go through quickly some of the different measures that I have for each one of these players as far as different measures statistically that we're analyzing. This includes ERA estimators, it includes ERA, expected ERA, FIP, expected FIP, and SIERA. What I have done is I've created an average, a weighted average, I should say, of each one of these, which can be calculated a little bit a little bit more emphasis on stats like SIERA and XFIP and XERA, just because I like those measures a little bit better in predicting future ERA. But I created some sort of average between the two. This would be something that I would take a little bit of a look at, especially because these are 2023 through 2025 stats. For example, with Edwin Diaz, if you combine all of his ERA estimators, it's about a 2.45 ERA type of pitcher with everything into account. And then somebody like Chris Martin, 2.92 ERA with everything in account. If you look at his ERA over the past 3 seasons, 2.41, but if you take into account its expected ERA, a little bit higher, it's about 2.92 would be a little bit better estimate. These are the ERA estimators. You can look through each one of these individual players. For example, with a player like a Michael Kopech. Now, clarification with Michael Kopech. A couple of years ago, he was a starting pitcher, which is weighting a little bit more into some of the averages as opposed to what he did on the relief portion. But still, if you look at the average of this, it's about a 5 ERA for him. So, could there be better options than a Michael Kopech, who has done a ton to this organization? And Casey interviewed him, absolutely tremendous human being. There could be potentially some better options business-wise that the Dodgers could turn to. When we look at swing and miss type stuff, there's a lot of different numbers to analyze swing and miss. Chase percentage, whiff percentage, strikeout percentage, walk percentage, strikeout minus walk percentage, swinging strike percentage, called strike plus swinging strike percentage, fastball velo, and then overall stuff plus are all measured to analyze the swing and miss stuff. What I have right here is a weighted average or in rank of each one of these players. For example, Edwin Diaz has some of the best swing and miss stuff of each one of these guys, taking into account everything. Ryan Helsley, Raisel Iglesias, Devin Williams, all some of the best swing and miss stuff that each one of these guys have. One player to keep in mind, I mentioned him a little bit earlier, Hunter Harvey has some of the better swing and miss stuff. on this list. 27% strikeout percentage, just a 6% walk percentage. That's a 20.9% strikeout minus walk percentage. Throws 98, pretty solid stuff. Plus, could be a little bit of an underrated target if you're looking for a little bit more of a cheaper option in this mix. Just looking at some of these guys, this is where the swing and miss numbers take place. Also, depends on what you want to look at for the walk percentage for each one of these guys. Kirby Yates, high walk percentage. Scott Barlow, high walk percentage. Michael Kopech, high walk percentage for him as well. It depends on what you want to prioritize with the swing and miss stuff. As far as the splits are concerned, what you're going to notice, there's a whole lot of relief pitchers right here that do pretty well against right-handed pitching with a weighted on base average of below 270, all the way from Kenley Jansen to Emilio Pagan, pretty solid option for the Dodgers to target, Tyler Rogers, Hunter Harvey, Paul Sewald, all the way up to options like an Edwin Diaz, Devin Williams, and Raisel Iglesias, which means if the express goal is to get somebody that can get right-handed hitters out, it's not completely necessary to look at the top of the market, although the top of the market is more predictable and a little bit better. But even so, remember the option of Tanner Scott and how he wasn't fully able to succeed for the Dodgers in his first year. They could turn to some of the other options that have been pretty solid. Robert Suarez has put up pretty good numbers over the past couple of seasons, especially by WOBA versus righties and lefties. Looking at some of the other guys right here, Tyler Rogers, really unique arm angle for him. Some of the guys more further down the list, Sean Armstrong, not good against lefties, but really good against righties. Same thing with Sir Anthony Dominguez. And then I also have quality of contact quality. And with this, I have ground ball percentage, weighted on base average, the expected weighted on base average, and hard hit percentage. You can go ahead and analyze each one of these numbers. Best one at generating weak contact is Tyler Rogers, who generates an insane amount of ground balls. Now, and then you can look at the lefties. With the lefties, they're going to be a lot better against left-handed hitters than against right-handed hitters. What I want to do, and I know this is information overload. This is going to be the thing of the welcome to the offseason. There's just way too much information as each part of this mix. What this is designed to do is to be an introduction to each one of you guys. One, to help you guys understand where some of my arguments throughout the course of the offseason are going to take place, because I'm going to lean pretty heavily into some of these numbers right here. Now, especially with relievers, this is not the complete picture of what they have, because a lot of evaluation of release pitchers comes from stuff that isn't measured based off of on-the-field results. A lot of it's going to be measured based off of unique arm angles and different slots that they can throw in, or different shapes, especially that the pitchers can do, and ways that the pitching staff believes they can help perhaps tweak some things in order to get some of the results. But if you are basing your analysis on more of a results basis for each one of these guys, it's important to take into account each one of these numbers, and not just the numbers that they had last year. It's important to take into account, and especially with relievers, with how volatile they are, to take into account the past couple of seasons, which is why I have displayed numbers 2023 to 2025 stats. In addition, I also included some starting pitching potential targets. Now, I'm not anticipating the Dodgers to be towards the top end of the market for starting pitching, because they have a lot of pitchers that are going to be coming back, and that pitchers that are going to be coming back off of injury that they're going to want to give some sort of playing time to, that are going to fit with the roster pretty well. Guys like River Ryan and Gavin Stone hopefully are going to be able to come back this year. I don't have any updates as far as them or Kyle Hurt or any of these guys that are coming back from injury. I don't get any of those updates from any one of these guys. I would anticipate the Dodgers to announce that at some sort of later date. But if those guys aren't ready throughout the course of the offseason, one consistent thing that we have seen throughout the course of the Andrew Friedman era is he is not afraid to go ahead and add a starting pitching option to be able to just eat innings if necessary. A guy like a James Paxton in 2024, I believe, or a Noah Syndergaard. Remember when the Dodgers added him as part of the mix? This is something that just about every single year of Andrew Friedman era, he seems to add a starting pitching. Now, that doesn't mean that the Dodgers need a starting pitcher, but if they want to give Yoshi Yamamoto a little bit of rest because of what he did during the World Series, or if they wanted to attack it with the similar strategy as what they did in this season. You could potentially see them adding a starting pitcher, even if it's not at the top of the market, even just to go ahead and eat innings. That's what that tab is specifically for, is to look at the starting pitchers that could potentially be available, even though it is not my expectation that they're going to be super aggressive in that category. It would not surprise me at all to see the Dodgers go out and target a starting pitcher. So, where are we at? Free agency is set to begin on Thursday. The Los Angeles Dodgers must make a decision with Max Muncy by Thursday as to whether or not they're going to pick up his club option. And it is my full anticipation that the Dodgers are going to pick up his club option. If the Dodgers pick up his club option, they have to go ahead and move off of at least one player on their 40-man roster. Some of the names that could include are potentially guys like a Tony Gonsolin, who only has one more year of team control and is not going to play a whole lot in the 2026 season coming back from injury. It could include potentially some of the other guys that are a little bit more fringe on the roster, like potentially, and I don't mean to throw any of these guys under the bus at all. I'm just talking about some of the math that could potentially come up if you're the Dodgers as far as bubble type players. Guys like Landon Knack, who has one option year left remaining on him. Could potentially include an Anthony Banda, who has 0 option years left for him, or a Nick Frasso, who they're running out of time with his development with 1 option year, or Paul Gervais, who they acquired in trade. He's got a couple of option years though, or Michael Grove coming back from injury, or potentially guys like a Will Klein or a Bobby Miller, not anticipating Will Klein because of what he did in the World Series, but how much are they going to rely upon him in the future? Or guys like a Ben Rortvedt or a Justin Dean or an Esteury Ruiz. There's going to be a lot of difficult decisions that the Dodgers are going to have to make going forward in order to figure out how to fit room into this roster. That decision is imminent, and they're going to have to make that call pretty shortly if they have not already made that call during the course of this live stream. When it comes to roster construction and when it comes to targeting some sort of outfielder, you have to prioritize a couple of different things and figure out what is going to be the best fit for the Dodgers roster based off the way it's currently constructed, unless there is a massive transformation in which they decide to trade either a Teoscar Hernandez or an Andy Pages. I'm not anticipating any of those things to happen for reasons why I issued on the last show and things I'm going to talk about in future shows. Not anticipating that to happen. So if that is not going to happen, the Dodgers have to figure out how they can prioritize somebody that can hit against right-handed pitching and somebody that can provide a little bit more stability in the defense. Whether that comes from trade, whether that comes through spending some sort of money and free agency, whether that's long-term contract or a shorter-term type of deal to be able to help bridge the gap for some of the prospects, they are going to have to make a decision for that. But they need additional outfield help for this roster to help fill in the hole and the gap that wasn't able to be filled in well by a guy like a Michael Conforto last year. In addition, they're going to need at least one right-handed reliever to help against right-handed hitters, particularly while they're waiting potentially for guys like an Evan Phillips or a Bruce Dark-Retterall or a Brock Stewart to be able to come back from injury. If they are able to, at the very least, add those 2 potential pieces, they're going to have a very, very solid club on their hands. Now, there's been a lot of talk, and I know there's been a lot of comments going back and forth about the Dodgers and them needing to get younger. And certainly that could be an option for them to be able to pursue, is trying to find some sort of way to be able to get younger. What we're going to be doing is eventually at some point, and I don't know if we're going to have a show, what the schedule of the shows is going to be like for the rest of the week, but I'm hoping to get at least one show with Casey to be able to talk through all of this and get some of his thoughts onto the roster. There are going to be some ways for the Dodgers to potentially get younger. But, for example, if you want an Alex Freeland or a Hae-Sung Kim to be able to be added to this roster to help the roster get younger, that's going to require some sort of sacrifice. And that's going to require you likely to move off of one of a Kike Hernandez or a Miguel Rojas. There is difficult decisions coming for the Los Angeles Dodgers. The business of baseball never stops, and the quest to win 3 World Series championships in a row is upon us. This is something that is rarely done in the history of the game of baseball. And actually, I don't remember the last time if it has ever been done in the National League before. It has been done in the American League, most recently by the New York Yankees and the Oakland A's before them. But as far as National League is concerned, the Dodgers have a historic opportunity upon themselves to win 3 World Series championships in a row. How do they get there? What is the best path going forward? Welcome to the offseason. The Dodgers are going to figure that out. What I would encourage you guys to do, explore the Excel spreadsheets that I have, do your own additional research on top of that, and come back with as much thoughts as you possibly can about this. I want to continue this conversation with each one of you. I apologize for the overwhelming amount of information and for the fact that I didn't get to go into any of the comments that you guys have, but I thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening and being part of this. It is a privilege of the world of mine to be able to talk Dodgers baseball and to use some of my insight and knowledge as best as I possibly can present it, to be able to give this information for you guys, to be able to help digest this as best you possibly can. And so then when the Dodgers do actually make moves, you guys are as best informed as you possibly can be as to why they are making certain decisions. And I want you guys to be able to understand this as fully as you possibly can. So explore that. Leave comments into the actual comment section of the video. I do my absolute best to be able to interact with each and every single one of those in this video, like I did with the Welcome to the Offseason Part 1. If you did not check that out, highly recommend check out Part 1. This has been Part 2 of the Welcome to the Offseason. And so hopefully this is able to help lay the groundwork as far as what is going to happen this offseason and create a lot of conversations going forward as far as what's going to be best. I don't know and don't have full thoughts and opinions as far as what the best avenue for the Dodgers is going to be. They have a lot of different options and a lot of different choices that they could go down. Which one they pursue is going to be up to debate until they actually make a decision. Thank you very much for tuning in to the show. Been a long show, been a lot of conversation back and forth, and hopefully a lot of good, valuable information for you guys. Continue the conversation with me. But until next time that we are live, which hopefully will be soon, could be as early as tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in. God bless, and go Dodgers.